the host and to congratulate, essentially, Kumba, Royal Academy of Music, on hosting yet another wonderful event. I think it's fabulous that Kumba has managed, through the Advanced Network, to give us this kind of space where we can actually do that thing about asking some of those knotty questions. It's the difficult ones, isn't it? You're ambitious, you want to make some sort of intervention, but one doesn't always know what's the right step, am I doing the right thing? And what we try to do in these spaces is to give you the room to explore with like-minded individuals, some of whom are one step on the next rung of the ladder, some of whom are 2 steps to the side, etc. So do take the opportunity. Everyone has voted with their feet today, and they're here because they're interested, they are curious, they have got commitment, they do want to know more. So we have a lovely amnesty in here. You can talk to strangers. Everybody, so someone comes up to you and says, hi, don't do the kind of mum said. Just kind of welcome them in, because that way we can all really, really get started and get grounded. Now, I've actually only got one job today, and that's to get you to some refreshments in about 50 minutes' time and to make sure that we finish on time. So it means that what I'm going to do is to just introduce the panel. We'll take a couple of speakers and then we'll have a brief Q&A and then we'll do so at the end. It's great to have these kinds of occasions where we can hear different things that are happening, different activities, different ways that people are connecting with that knotted question of diversity and inclusion in music development. We're going to start with Adam from the Arts Council. Adam, all the biographies, we've got real weather as well. All of our speakers have got biographies that go way back beyond my arm. And these are all included in your pack, so do take a chance to have a look at the back history. But just very briefly, Adam Jeans is Senior Relationship Manager, Music and Children and Young People at the Arts Council's London office. Former roles include General Manager of Arts Worldwide, which produced the Yemen Festival back in '97 and the Bangladesh Festival in '99. He's also been Assistant Director of Visiting Arts and Project Director of Intercult Productions in Sweden. Adam, do share with us what's happening at the Arts Council.
I fear that Paul Broadhurst's has unfortunately summoned the weather, London weather. Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I must, of course, make 2 apologies. First of all is on behalf of Helen Sprott, who would love to be here, but unfortunately she has to be in Cambridge and it's too complicated to get back into London. So. And the other thing is that I must rush away, unfortunately, and I'm very sorry not to be here for the rest of the discussion because it looks like it's going to be really fascinating and very full and very fruitful. And again, after the music we heard earlier, I'm sorry to be from the Arts Council and talk about boring things like policy and funding and stuff like that, but unfortunately, here we go. I don't know how many of you are not aware of what a music hub is, but maybe I'll just start the conversation off by telling you that a music hub is essentially a form of consortium, a group of organisations that are getting together to have a strategic overview and also then deliver music education services to the different boroughs and counties. It's usually on a local authority basis. So far, so good. They sprang into life because of Darren Henley and his review and a thing that's called the National Plan for Music Education. You've all heard of the National Plan for Music Education? You'd be astonished how many people have not. There is an awful gap in knowledge about what this marvellous document actually says, which guarantees, ladies and gentlemen, equality of access for everyone to high-quality musical activities, music tuition. It's a great document. It's designed to be a blueprint, a sort of manifesto for the, as it were, access of children, young people, to music. Now, I think it's fair to say that the news of it has only travelled so far through the undergrowth. It has not yet fully reached into every corner of the education system, and specifically not onto the desks of most head teachers and school leaderships, or even, we could say, other educationalists. So we have a bit of an issue, as it were, getting the message out that such a marvellous document, which has in fact also got some money attached to it. Okay, the money is not as great as it could be, but then there's only two types of money, none and not enough, and we do not have enough at the moment. We hope we get some more. But that document is a commitment over a 3-year period, 2-year period, 3-year period, to see a kind of change come over music both in school and out of school. Now this is somewhat unique in Europe, possibly in the world, and we need to capitalise on it. So the first and most important thing to say is that the hubs exist, and if you do not know about your hub and you want to, find out now. Be involved in them. Because the other thing we can say about a hub is that it's actually exactly the sort of thing that was just described to us. It is a small community of thoughtful individuals. It is a place where conversations can take place, where discussions can happen, where people can learn from each other. This is, of course, a teaching organisation, but in these circumstances, these hubs could also be learning organisations. They learn from each other. I was thinking also about this idea of the curiosity, community and commitment, which is exactly, again, what hubs are about. So just to sort of get into the sort of the nitty-gritty, I'm trying to be as quick as possible, and assuming that you have a lot of knowledge about this already. A hub looks at its local area. It considers the circumstances on the ground, the reality. And it does what the Arts Council calls, or has asked it to call, a needs analysis. This sounds like a very boring document. But it is effectively a research, an overview, an insight into what is in the local community, what musical activities are taking place locally, how are young people accessing music. That's both in the school setting and the out-of-school setting. The Music Education Plan, the National Plan for Music Education, actually says that hubs have got to do 4 things. They've got to ensure that there are whole class ensemble activities, so that's things that happen in schools, that children sing together, and that they play in ensembles. In other words, they sing, play together, and there is progression, the opportunity to progress. Now, thinking a little bit about James Thomas, which I think is a very interesting example. I went to the Hackney Music Gala, and one of the things that really struck me about the Hackney Music Gala is that in the first half of that gala, there was not one violin on stage. Now that's quite an achievement for a music service, as was turning into a hub. That in fact it was other genres, other instruments, voice, and all sorts of things that did not involve an orchestra. Now one of the things that we always have to remember about the hubs is that they are built on a foundation of music services that have come from many, many years of development. They've embedded themselves into their local communities. And what often happens is that these are long-standing traditions. And we are asking organisations to overturn, perhaps, to make a change in a very deeply embedded function that is actually, in some ways, also part of the local authority pride in its local community. It's a very serious thing that is being asked. The Darren Henley Review, on which all of this was based, was saying, music education is very patchy up and down the country. But actually, in local authorities, in a setting of that kind, the orchestra is actually really important. It plays a very important function. It's there, the mayor is there, needs an orchestra. This is part of the life, the local civic life of the local authority. To overturn that is a very difficult thing. To change that is a very difficult thing. But it's not beyond the bounds of belief. Another thing I think is a very important point to make. I've often spoken to leaders of hubs, and what they often say to me is something very telling. They say, well, we only have 120 places in our orchestra. And that means that the county or the borough orchestra, the elite players that they are working with, there's a limitation. For those elite players, the top of the pyramid is very tight. But there is, in fact, in the Music Education Plan, this commitment to music for all. So I think it's very important to remember that there is the elite and there is the much wider mid-range progression. And the complication is that those progression routes, that fourth core role, it fizzles out. Where can it go? It's not just a matter of race. It's also not just a matter of class. It's also a matter of money. It's also a fact that there are not these opportunities. So what do we do? The money is getting less. Hubs have come in. One of the things which I sometimes say is, okay, what about your other partners? Could any of them run any kind of ensemble, any kind of orchestra, alongside your orchestra? Can they diversify your offer in some way through their own work? And I think it's fair to say that there is some movement in that. I think that that is something that's starting to happen. So when we talk about diversity in terms of the music education hubs, I think it's important to split it a little bit into 4 areas, or I would split it into 4 areas. I would talk about the diversity of offer, in other words, the genre, the instruments, perhaps the music in terms of cultural difference. I talk about the diversity of the workforce, who is doing the work, who are the teachers. I would look at the diversity of the skills of the workforce. What do they know? And I think in this instance, in this gathering, the one which is perhaps the most relevant is to think about the diversity of the governance. Who makes up the hub? Well, the hubs are essentially consortia. So organisations coming together, this community of people coming together. And that's where the discussions will take place about what the hub provides. We ask them to do their needs analysis. They create their provision, or their idea of what the provision should be, and then it's delivered. So the question always has to be, who decided where they went to do the needs analysis? Who did they talk to? And I think one of the big questions for the Arts Council in these early days, as it were, running the contract with the DFE to look after the hubs, is the depth of the needs analysis, the width of it, the quality of it, whose voices were asked to speak up, who was asked the questions. I think this is now a really important issue for the hubs, because otherwise they may just continue delivering what it was they used to deliver before, and that they will not change, because people need an orchestra. Mayor will always want an orchestra. There will always be parents who want their children to learn musical instruments, and there will also be a vast number of other parents who would like their kids to learn musical instruments, but they just don't have the chance to, because the offer's not there, because the workforce is not there, because the skills in the workforce are not there, and because nobody thought of designing that into the governance. So I would say, just to sort of wrap up, there's one very important thing to say: where are we now? Well, it's fairly early days still. That didn't stop Ofsted from doing a report on hubs. And the report was very negatively reported. What the report says is that basically the hubs came in September 2012, and 2 or 3 months later, Ofsted went and investigated 31 hubs. In fact, no, it was 31 schools. It wasn't even 31 hubs. And judged the quality, or the effect, as it were, of this great change. Of course, there hadn't been a change. It was too early. Not only that, it was a very deeply embedded traditional system. And it's difficult to overturn something like that in 3 months with less money. And what we can say, though, is that the report itself, when I read it, I read a pre-publication version of it. And there was no publicity around it at all. I read it, I thought, gosh, this is a good report. It says that 1/3 of the hubs are doing really well and bringing vitality, and 2/3 of them, they need to do more work. And it's completely in line with almost all the other reports that I've read from Ofsted about music education. So I was very, very surprised when even Ofsted reported it negatively. They sort of looked at the glass half empty version and said, well, actually, 2/3 of hubs are failing. Now, I don't think that helped at all, and in fact, I think it's very interesting to see that Ofsted, the inspector responsible for that, has recently gone to several meetings. I've heard him do it. He did it at the expo, the Music Education Expo on Friday, and did apologise. And I think that that's a good sign that there is a feeling amongst those who are looking at this and engaged in this, that there is some change underway. How do you, could you, as a network, contribute to that change? Well, I think it is where I suggested before. It is potentially sitting around the table in these rooms where people are discussing how they're going to manage music education in their local authority. It is as local as that. It is about thinking perhaps about what the opportunities are, but also what is not there. And it's also working together to bring about change across local authorities, beyond the borough boundary. And I've no doubt there are many hubs actually, and I can even see some in the room. You know, you will know, I'm sure, that the most difficult part of the job is building the relationships, the long-term partnerships and the development, because you're the experts in the music education world. But the time is in the discussion. It's working out the detail. That's the most difficult part. So I would say from the point of view of this network, those exciting conversations that could be had, I think you're probably the right kind of interlocutor, let's put it like that, for the music education world to meet. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adam. Thank you. As Adam's got to rush off, I thought I've just asked him if he's got time for a couple of questions, just so that you can, if you have any questions, get a chance to ask them. Whilst you're warming up, if I could sneak in, Adam, and just ask you, we're quite used to activities starting off, and I think it's a shame that Ofsted got in after just 3 months and reported, because we understand that these things need time. But how is the Arts Council going to ensure that that momentum is maintained and that delivery actually reaches the aspirations?
I think to support initiatives such as this one, and also the GLA, as Paul mentioned, and their work. And there is also a number of sector bodies who are active as well. The Arts Council is in a position of being the fund holder for the hub grants. And so our way of looking at it is that we're bringing things together or trying to align funding and resources. And I suppose the advantage of that is that there is an overview, but the disadvantage is that we're a very small organisation actually now, and music education is an enormous subject, it's an enormous topic, it's an important topic, and it needs to be resourced properly. The way to resource it is to approach it from this collective point of view, from this hub point of view, and to ask the hubs and the people involved in the sector to set their own standards, their own targets, and to implement. We need, as I think Paul said, some action. It's all about action right now. There's been maybe a period where we went, well, what's it all about? And now we understand to some extent, and we can start laying plans for the future. And I would say one more thing about Ofsted. I think it's true that it was early, and it was probably maybe too early, but it's also useful that it happened when it did, because it gives us a chance to have those discussions and to reflect.
Any other questions? No? In that case, I shall move on to our second set of speakers. Thank you very much, Anna.